CX, customer experience, is really the most powerful, tangible expression of your brand promise. You can say anything in your messaging, but it's really what customers actually feel when they interact with you that defines loyalty.
Hi, I'm Matt Egol, host of the CX and Culture Connection podcast, the podcast for leaders looking to drive impact by focusing on customer experience and culture together. I'm excited to have Jenny on the podcast today to talk about the intersection of brand strategy, customer experience, and culture. Jenny and I worked together at PwC, where she was a senior leader focused on innovation in the firm's experience center. And Jenny's led brand strategy and integrated marketing teams at Beam Suntory and Wayfair and other clients. She recently launched Rock the Brands, where she serves as a fractional CMO and does consulting work as well, and helps position direct to consumer brands for disruptive growth via research, brand, and CX strategy. I'm excited to team with Jenny as well at JourneySpark Consulting on ways to serve clients together. It's really exciting to have you on the podcast, Jenny.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Matt. It's so great to get our consulting band back together and be here with you. So super excited to get into the
You
conversation.
know, it's funny you should say get the band back together because one of my fun memories when we worked on a alcohol client together was actually doing karaoke together. I remember what a good singer you are.
I am still in a rock cover band, I will say. That is kind of like my midlife crisis slash side hustle in the evening sometimes. So it's still happening. And maybe we'll do karaoke when we meet up again.
That'd be a lot of fun. It's definitely a fun client outing. Um, So, Jenny, you've helped both emerging and established companies differentiate their brands and customer experience. And one of the things that I've always enjoyed teaming on is this intersection of how brands are built through experience, particularly in the direct to consumer space where you've done so much work. What's the role of customer experience to shape and deliver on the brand promise?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think customer experience is really the most powerful and tangible expression of your brand promise. It's not just talking the talk like a marketing campaign can do, but walking the walk with the customer in mind every single step of the way. A brand can really say anything in its messaging, but it's really what customers actually feel when they interact with the brand that builds loyalty and trust and advocacy. And Wayfair's a great example where we didn't just define the brand purpose. I was helping them reposition their brand to a more modern customer. We really had to identify these unmet customer needs that were pain points in the online furniture space and translate it into this seamless omni-channel experience from, personalized AR in the app to inclusive marketing guidelines that kind of made every customer feel seen. So I really think the customer experience is the brand these days, and in the future, it will continue to be. And investing in that first is going to be the most important thing, I think, for every single brand, big or small.
Well, when in Wayfair's case, so much of the brand promise is around, making the journey easy for those life moments when when you got a new house, a new family. A lot of times people are buying things when there's like new life moments. And Wayfair is a partner to help make that moment easier for you. But so what do you think are the elements at Wayfair of the brand? And then you know, you're talking about a lot about digital experiences here as opposed to in store, which I guess, makes it a really interesting opportunity to kind of curate an experience through great content and other elements like the website and the app.
Yeah, I really think you hit the nail on the head. There's a lot of, especially when you're going through a life moment, but there's a lot of anxiety that comes with buying, especially like a high AOV item online that you can't touch or feel or sit in. And so how do you simulate that experience whether it's through customer reviews, speaking with a customer experience agent who has either personally bought, they can sometimes match a customer agent who has personally bought the thing that you're interested in buying and how it's held up over the years. And now, actually, Wayfair, I wasn't involved in this, but they launched a Wayfair verified program because they were having some quality issues with their furniture. So they got on top of that. And now they have, top, I think, 50,000 SKUs or what have you are going to become Wayfair verified and go through this very rigorous process to help give customers confidence that, this will stand the test of time. Um, Also, kind of interesting, you mentioned e-com versus physical. So while I was at Wayfair, they started going into physical retail. And the whole value proposition there was they don't imagine that they're going to make the same amount of revenue in a physical retail store. However, there's a certain number of furniture sales that will always be in store. They're not going to get 100% share of wallet only being an e-com. And so to give customers confidence in these major areas like Chicago, and they just launched another store, I think in the suburbs of Atlanta for Wayfair, where you can literally sit on a couch and feel it and be like, this is comfortable, but then have the endless aisle of a digital experience, configuring it in your space to match your kind of specs and your style and custom kind of configure it. Um, that I think is the holy grail. Um, and so I think even if you don't have a Wayfair store close to you, the fact that a friend might have sat on a couch that was comfortable can also give you the confidence. So I think that omni-channel experience of the digital and physical working together is again the holy grail if you can do it. If not, obviously there's digital ways to simulate physical.
A lot of the focus for marketing, I feel like, has flipped. Historically, a lot of people talked about the funnel and how upper funnel um, was really about awareness and building perception of the brand, and then you're driving through down the funnel to activation. But one of the themes that's come up in a lot of the podcast discussions, like with Jim Keen and with Todd Unger and with Neil Hoyne, was about the compression of the funnel. And like Todd talks about the tornado funnel, right? Um, and I'd love to get your perspective on how marketing's evolved, and particularly, like, can our brands, if we talk about brands being built through experience, that's actually flipping the model from awareness then activation to you're actually creating experience, and activations occurring much faster, and we're actually shaping the perception through the way they engage, and it's blurring the lines between kind of brand identity and activation.
100%. And I think like this really came to fruition again, bringing Wayfair up again when we had very high brand awareness and we really had to drive that kind of preference, being the first. The Wayfair would be the first to go. And because there were so many pain points in the space and they had come up with all these customer experience innovations, we put those customer experience innovations in an ad with Kelly Clarkson. That was our first launch. And it put fuel to the fire. So the customer experience was on blast. It wasn't about the product. It was now an experience company. The product was in the background, but it's how do we make your life easier? And so to your point about experience as the marketing plan, like I think there's so many companies that have become so successful with that. I mean, some of the best marketing doesn't feel like marketing at all. It's baked right into the experience. If you look at, a Trader Joe's, they don't spend on ads. They built a cult following by obsessing over the in-store vibe, friendly staff, products that you can't get anywhere else. Their customer experience is their marketing.
I have 5 Hawaiian shirts in my closet from doing work with Trader Joe's, where
Perfect.
I literally had to wear a Hawaiian shirt at the headquarters.
There you go.
Yeah. It's a really fun culture.
It's such a fun culture. I mean, Zappos is another really good one where, people don't really remember their banner ads. They remember getting off a call with customer service and saying, "Wow, that was amazing." It's kind of that emotional residue that's brand gold, and it turns customers into advocates that then do the marketing for you. So you don't need a big, sexy Super Bowl campaign anymore.
Allow me to briefly interrupt the podcast to share an invitation for you to join one of our mastermind groups. These groups are for leaders building out the CX function at their organization. They are for culture champions looking to develop and sustain behaviors that bring their organization's mission, vision, purpose, and values to life. I'm excited to team with Randy Rothenberg, former CEO of the IAB, on a mastermind group focused on experience as a winning marketing strategy. I'm teaming with Tamar Cohen, who has led CX and EX teams at Zoetis and Travelers, on another group focused on CX EX alignment, and with Greg Kilstrom, host of the Agile Brand podcast, on a group focused on building a self-funding growth flywheel. Each group meets monthly for 90 minutes. Members receive a coaching hour each month and can attend quarterly workshops. Go to JourneySpark's website for more information. Please DM me on LinkedIn with any questions. Now, let's get back to the podcast. Now, we've talked a little bit about furniture and e-commerce, but you've also had a lot of experience in a lot of direct-to-consumer categories like food and beverage and travel and other categories. What is it that has drawn you to the direct-to-consumer space, and what are some of the kind of lessons learned that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, I think what really drives me and how I've really approached every problem, even if it's a marketing campaign or a customer experience design, is what is that unmet customer need? And that's why I love D2C brands, because I actually have a theater background. I was a theater major, and I just go back to that. I put myself in the customer's shoes. I literally act like I'm the customer, even if it's a man or a baby or whatever. I put myself in that customer's shoes, and I go through the whole journey. And it's such a basic, not rocket science type exercise, but you really uncover all these unmet needs, some which have been solved by the competition, disruptors often, some which have not. And it's just like, why is that broken in this industry? Like Warby Parker, like they completely disrupted the industry. Why do you have to buy glasses like that? Uber, same thing. That's what really drives me. Like, what is the intersection of that unmet need, that competitive white space, and where the brand actually has the right to win? And how do you create a brand they can't live without, driven by customer experience? So I talk a lot about future proofing, which we can talk about, and why that can really be kind of a little bit of the secret weapon to lasting a long time, especially in a very dynamic environment, especially now with disruptors and external factors kind of clipping at your heels.
One of the things that we did a few times together working on client projects that stuck with me that I really loved that um, was this idea of backcasting, where you're really good at this. I'm sure you still are. Is like imagine the future and then think, what do we have to do to get there? Is that what you mean by future proofing?
Completely. I think it's future proofing to me really means building a brand with adaptability at its core. So, like to your point, where do you want to be in the next 5 years? It doesn't have to be perfect, but how do you create an MVP tomorrow, within the next 12 months, that gets you to that North Star? But again, with an infrastructure that's flexible. So you're not necessarily building for that specific North Star. It's in that area. But if something changes, a lever changes, you can adapt and move. So it's not really about predicting the future, but being prepared for it. Um, like a flexible brand architecture, creating content models that can kind of scale in emerging channels, and obviously constantly listening to your customer and having a very healthy paranoia about your direct and emerging competitors.
One of the things I like to do on the podcast is connect to prior episodes a little bit for the audience. And I'd encourage everyone to like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. But one of the things you got me thinking about, Jenny, is my conversation with Oded Netzer from Columbia and Christopher Frank. He wrote a great book called Decisions Over Decimals. And Oded, in addition to being head of the Data Institute at Columbia, um, does a lot of work with Amazon. And he talked on our podcast about this uh, press release frequently asked question approach that gets used at Amazon a lot, which is when you're launching a product or a campaign, write the press release for it. It's like we're talking about backcasting or imagining the future like that. They do this at Amazon. They will actually write a press release for something they're working on and then talk about it in a meeting. Say, what did we have to do to make this successful, to future proof something? In my own book, the CX and Culture Connection, which is an acronym for, it's built around the acronym for culture. The L in culture is to look ahead 3 years and visualize what you had to do to make your company successful in a certain way. So you see as creating an emotionally engaging experience, you as understanding your culture and how it helps you get that experience you're trying to create. And then L is looking ahead and visualizing the future, which is what you're talking about. It's like, how do you, how do you visualize the future and future proof your business to deliver that?
And I think that it's a very difficult exercise to do in periods of recession when you want to get into your comfort zone and go short-term profitability, ROAS, short-term performance marketing, and just forget all of this backcasting and future proofing. And I think then what that does is when you elevate out of it, which inevitably we always do, you have no right to win anymore, and you have a very transactional relationship and probably a subpar customer experience because you're not thinking about that backcasting and that future proofing. And so what I would encourage all the listeners to do, especially right now when everyone's kind of freaking out, and I am also, is don't forget about that future proofing. Have a certain percentage, you can time box it, of your resources dedicated, 10%, 20%, whatever, 5%, to that North Star vision, and continuing to have that in mind and at least educating your employee base on what that North Star is, despite the blip that might be happening at the short term moment.
A lot of a lot of growth is been in emerging brands, in a lot of categories where like whether it's beauty or food or beverage, where a lot of the growth is driven by emerging brands. You've worked with a number of those emerging brands, and um, what's your focus in terms of like, being a fractional versus doing consulting work? How do you work with companies like that?
Yeah. You know, I tend to, I mean, I've worked with companies from like 25 million to almost 25 billion. So it's hard to say like, this is my perfect client. I actually like working with different types of companies. I think the smaller companies, I tend to play more of a staff aug or fractional role that wears a lot of different hats. So I was fractional CMO for a smaller home decor brand. And it's really fulfilling to work with those brands because the pace and the proximity are so close and so fast. At Oliver Gow, which was the home decor company, I was embedded in everything from the brand positioning to the product portfolio, go to market strategy across channels. It all happened in 6 months. 6 months. That's like one planning cycle at Wayfair. That's like how long it takes to plan the thing. And we did everything from planning to execute. It's not bad or good, it's just very different. The budgets are obviously smaller, so you have to get more creative. But we were able to make decisions and impact faster because there was one decision maker and very, very clear alignment on goals. Um, I would say at larger brands like a Wayfair or a Trader Joe's or a Beam Suntory, the scale is greater, but the levers take longer to move, obviously, and you really need to build alignment across multiple teams and markets. Um, so I think with emerging brands, the feedback loop is faster, the risk tolerance is higher. It can lead to incredibly disruptive growth that's executed well. And I think that's why brands that didn't exist 10 years ago, like Peloton, Casper, Warby Parker, I mean, name them all, there's probably 100 of them, were able to scale so fast and really take share by disrupting the retail space, by moving quickly. So I think there's ways, though, for bigger companies to employ this, to have that disruptive thinking, going back to that certain percentage of your time should be dedicated to that disruption and innovation around CX, on emerging customer and market needs.
Yeah, I'd like to love to get your thoughts on this, that any company needs to pick strategically one of three areas they want to focus on. And I like to use this better, faster, cheaper framework that, we both used that with clients in the past. And I made it a focus in my book, and some of the work more recently is with our value accelerator at JourneySpark. But basically, if you think of the long pole in the tent is going to be either better, faster, and cheaper. And this is actually where your strategy and your brand promise and your CX come together. Is like, are you trying to be better? In which case, the things that you're doing for customer experience should align to better. Are you trying to be faster or are you trying to be cheaper? And it's really hard to do all three really well. Like an example would be like Walmart is cheaper, Amazon is faster, and Apple is better, right? And they've chosen their pathway to value, and they doesn't mean you don't do elements of all three, but you have a long pole in the tent. You pick a place that you're really focused, and then your culture needs to be aligned to that. Like in your if your culture, if your strategy is around delivering faster, then you want to focus on behaviors in your culture that reinforce faster. And a lot of your experience design and should be aligned to those priorities. How do you think about like settings priorities for value, and do you use a framework like this, or do you have other ways of thinking about picking the right bets and then making sure the delivery is coherent to that?
Yeah, I usually approach it a little bit more nuanced based on the brand. I agree with that theory of better, faster, cheaper. You have to pick one, and usually cheaper. There's only one player that can be cheaper in most, and in most industries, it's Walmart or Temu, and so it's very dangerous to pick that one if there's an established player in that industry, because then the margins are being squeezed. So that's why I say go faster, or I would maybe say easier could be like a term for that, or better.
Easier could be either better or faster or a combination of the two. Yeah.
Right. And so, like, yes, I think I take what the brand's unique value proposition is, which is under one of those 3 umbrellas, but more specific, and then have pillars by which they deliver. Whether it's the experience, the product, the people, the process, and what that benefit is for the customer that ladders up to that unique value proposition. And that unique value proposition should be sustainable for at least 3, if not 5 years. It should not just be for 1 year. So you really have to think about the market movement and what's going to happen when you come up with that. So, yeah, I definitely agree with that framework though, and sticking to it and not trying to be too many things, um, because one will inevitably dilute the other.
One of the um, things that's so important to be able to pick the right opportunities is generating the right insights. How do you think about when you're working with brands, like generating new insights and then driving that into the business? What's the role of insights, and how has the playbook evolved for you as things like AI have made things easier to do?
I always try to use first party data if it's available. So if the client already has a segmentation or access to insights, I'll use that. But if they don't and they don't have the budget to do it, I agree. AI has really transformed everything we do from intuition based to just insight accelerated. We really have access to more real time, deep behavioral data than we've ever had before. And it can really help us personalize messaging, optimize campaigns dynamically, surface patterns that would have taken weeks or months to uncover manually. Um, so I do, when needed, use AI for that. And even if I'm, have first party insights, I'm kind of filling in the blanks with AI. And I know that you have an insights offering powered by AI that can get you better, faster, cheaper insights, rather than launching something based on subjective opinion. So I think that's very exciting too.
One of the things that um, I recently did a talk on culture of experimentation, and you can see the link for the recording on the screen. Um, and This is something that I also presented at a conference, the CXP conference, with Nitin Share, who was on the podcast recently, talking about like the age of simulation. He's the CEO of a company called Wevo, which we use them at PwC, and I've used them at a number of clients since. The reason I bring this up, Jenny, is like we were able to with Wevo. Um, Take what would normally take days or weeks to do research, and you can do it in minutes. So it's actually simulation. So like you think of all the times that we do either new primary research to build insights, or we do user testing. to kind of put concepts in front of people, whether a product or a website. And I'm not saying this will go away, but if you go from running 10 experiments a year to 5,000, you can't do new research every single time. Like when we would do consulting projects and bake research into that, that would add 5 weeks to the project, right? Now with Wevo and other tools, but I think Wevo is the leading one here. You can actually simulate how a persona would react to something using AI because they've taken millions of user tests and run it through an LLM. So if you don't have a persona, Wevo can actually guesstimate who your personas are by looking at your content and then suggesting, inferring who your personas are. But if you take the time with your first party data and with your other primary research to come up with personas, which is what we did, for example, with a travel client, we we actually developed their personas with them using more traditional methods, like interviews and surveys and things like that. And then once we had this, we were able to use Wevo to start optimizing and iterating on content through the eyes of the personas. And we got a 50% improvement in their marketing ROI by starting to test and tailor what we were doing through the eyes of the personas. And this is something that, like, for example, when Nitsan talks about on her podcast, MasterCard doesn't make any changes to product or copy or content without testing it through Weibo first, because it takes only 5 minutes.
Wild. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Now, and you talked about first party data, like with platforms like Optimove or Salesforce or Adobe, you can run hundreds of thousands of experiments a year and use microsegmentation and data to see what people respond to.
Yeah. I think it's just so fantastic that you can really have the voice of the customer at your fingertips, especially if that first party data is being modeled with AI. And so you're not really guessing on accuracy. I think the one thing I would worry about, when testing content and guessing who your customer is like, hopefully that's the top performing content for your audience. Because if the content that they're basing it off of actually isn't performing well, then maybe they'll misguess the audience. But I'm sure they're kind of triangulating all of the data and making sure that it's the top performing assets for that audience and modeling it off of that. But it brings me to this, like, what effect is AI having on our industry, like marketing, CX, all of that? I think there's a lot of fear around, like, "Oh, it's gonna replace jobs." And sure, in the short term, just like, the dot-com boom, it will, but it will, I think, enable and empower everybody to be more strategic and more critical thinkers because you need still that human factor. It's not like robots on their own are going to take over everything. It's powered by humans, it's filtered by humans, it's edited by humans, it's launched by humans. But it's like having a team of like 100 different researchers and executors to help bring your strategy and vision to life that is done with your human mind. So that's the cool thing about it.
Totally. I think actually, um, what AI is allowing now is increased volume of experimentation, increased volume of creativity and trying things, where in the past the constraint was human bandwidth. So, for example, with one CPG client, we actually figured out that they spent 300,000 man hours a year creating content. When you looked at all of the time they were spending with photo shoots and writing, creating coupons and creating promotions and creating shopper events for retailers and doing, detail pages for e-commerce, it's a lot of human effort to create all that content. And now if you want to start changing stuff more often and tailoring it and personalizing it, the bandwidth constraint was for them was they didn't have enough person time to create the content or to run the research and optimize it. And what you and I are talking about is the ability to do stuff really fast and try things where human beings will be able to do more of these experiments and not spend as much time, like on the execution of creating the content because they'll use the AI to do it, but there's a human in the loop.
The human in the loop. Yes, absolutely. And not only making the content, but to your point, figuring out what content to launch with and what's good. Do you know how much time we would spend at all of these companies, including when we were consulting, on our subjective opinion of what we should be launching with from a customer experience perspective, from a marketing perspective? And it was all subjective opinion, not based in the customer because we are not the customer. We can guess. But to have that insights enabled to really quantitatively pre-test, it might not be perfect, but it's 85, 95% closer than where we were. And to eliminate all of those back and forth months of conversation to have all this paradox of choice and just launch it and see, I think that is also going to be a game changer.
Well, and one of the things that Nitsan talked about in our podcast, I think is really powerful, is a lot of the times now we'll test things where you have to invest in creative and development to test things. Now, when we were working in the experience center together, we would build an MVP as a rapid prototype and test the prototype before you invest too much effort in development. But now you can actually test things even faster. And what that allows you to do is save on development hours. Before you, a lot of the wasted effort is actually development time to get a prototype that's testable. So you want to test things even faster and get really rapid feedback and simulate it before you get too far over your skis. And then run lots of experiments in the market for really small changes. I think there's a lot of opportunity with insights like we're talking about. And I think there's also a lot of opportunity on activation, like you were talking about first party data to run experiments with your website, with your app, with e-commerce. And is that something you think is becoming easier for smaller brands to do as they ride on others' rails and the technology gets cheaper?
I think so. I think that if smaller brands leadership, they are experiment focused, test and fail fast, which often they are. Um, I think that because a lot of them are bandwidth constrained, they're a little bit just more hesitant to take on a new kind of AI tool that will do that. So I think it's about leveraging expertise from people like us that have used it before at various sizes of companies at similar sizes and seen success to help get them over the hump of, this is not going to break your operations. This is actually going to scale it. And how can we make it adopted and test it in a way that will enable you to still, make your company run?
You've talked about being a fractional. One thing that I love to get your take on this that I find often works is a lot of times I just work as a coach rather than like a fractional where I have clients that are, 10 hours a month retainer, right? So it's a variation on a fractional where instead of them thinking that I'm 2 days a week, I'm 10 hours a month and I'm more coaching their team. And this is a model that works well with smaller companies because we're really helping them. So instead of bringing us in to just to do one workshop or to do one research project, we can always plus the work and add research, but it's more about staying engaged and coaching and plugging into their team on a regular basis. Like, how much time do you need to spend in your work to have impact? Does it have to be 2 days a week, or in some cases, can it be 10 hours a month?
No, I could definitely be 10 hours a month. And I think you're spot on. I think with some of the smaller companies, that need, like, advisory services. They have the team, they just need to be upskilled, reskilled, or pointed in the right direction. The CEO doesn't necessarily have the time or expertise for it. It's a perfect model, to have office hours where, anyone could sign up and ask whatever question related to their expertise, and you can point them in the right direction. I found that the topics that are most hot in advisory in my world are, um, marketing, influencer, brand positioning, leveraging AI for all of the above. Some CX questions, I feel like they tend to want to solve the marketing problem first because it's easier. When really often I tell them, like, this is not a marketing problem. This is actually a messaging problem because you don't have the customer experience to message something superior. And so then, the advisory will shift from marketing to customer experience. But I love that model to your point because it allows you to be flexible in terms of what you're helping them with, while also delivering value in a way that's super affordable.
one thing I'll share with the audience is that you can certainly feel free to reach out to Jenny directly if you want to tap into her expertise. But we also do joint meetings. So if you want to have a conversation with the two of us together, and whether that leads to a workshop or a coaching relationship, we will we're very happy to collaborate and bring the band together for brand integrated marketing CX combined. And it'd be a lot of fun to do that if that's something you're interested in.
Yeah, agreed. It would be really fun to do that. Yes, and, my website is launching and live, so feel free to visit rockthebrands.com, and you can check out my work and some of the things that I've done, some of which I've worked on with Matt in our past lives. Really excited about that also, and it's been so fun to talk about this, I can't even tell you. It's giving me very good memories.
Oh, it's always fun to team together. Um, one closing question I have is, given the title of the podcast around CX and culture connection, is just to get your thoughts on, as a marketing and CX leader, how do you see your role in helping shape the culture at the companies that you work with?
Yeah, it's such a good one, and one that often gets overlooked, but it's so important. I would say culture is kind of that invisible hand that guides how teams think, act, and innovate. As a leader, I see my role as part strategist, part storyteller, part coach, to your earlier point. Um, the employee experience is really an extension of the brand experience. At Wayfair, I developed this dream job workshop to help marketers articulate and achieve their personal and professional goals in kind of a future proofing way in the next 5, 10 years. Just like Wayfair is helping customers create homes of their dreams, we can help our employees create careers of their dreams. And so, how are you tying the brand promise to the employee experience? I also championed inclusive marketing practices, not just because they were the right thing to do, but because they made our brand more relevant and more resonant. And so, educating everybody on what inclusive marketing looks like made everyone feel more included in the company and really brought the culture together. So, I think culture doesn't just influence what we build, it determines how we build it and who we build it for.
I think of the CX and culture connection, and you nailed it, is how your employees contribute to delivering on your brand is the connection between CX and culture. So like my book and podcast are all about how the CX and EX go together. And essentially, how do your employees, by the way they show up directly with customers, as well as indirectly with the way they team and collaborate with each other to create experiences, your employees deliver your brand. And that's culture. Culture is all about behavior. I was at a conference recently with Qualtrics at X4, and I thought the best speaker was Danny Meyer, the founder of Shake Shack, and also like Union Square Cafe, and like Tabla, and a lot of great restaurants. But his whole approach is to build great cultures at his companies where the people he actually puts the focus on the employees first, and that if you get the culture right with the employees, they will deliver great hospitality and great experiences. And I recently did a book review of Unreasonable Hospitality, which is by the one of Danny Meyer's mentees, Will Guidara, who was the manager of 11 Madison Park, which he took to the number one restaurant in the world. And he ended up buying the restaurant with the chef from Danny Meyer's company, like and it was, but both those books are all about culture, the books and speeches. And what I really resonates with me, what you're talking about. If you want to build a great brand, the employee engagement is so key to that.
So key. And I think it's a lot of companies say they have a great culture. Most every company says it. And they have actually a beautiful deck that says all the things that everyone should do. Do they do it? Do they follow through? Does leadership follow through with it? I think that putting the proof in the pudding with your actions is the biggest thing, because I think there's been so many companies that have this beautiful ethos, right? And then the actual experience doesn't match up, similar to the analog of marketing message that doesn't match up to a customer experience, you know? They need to match. The culture and the, customer experience and the brand promise all needs to match for it to work and feel authentic.
What we do with the Value Accelerator, folks can see the Value Accelerator link on the to our website on screen. Is we bring together the strategy, the culture, and the voice of the customer. Um, and your strategy is about, like Jenny's saying, getting leaders alignment on how are you going to bring your mission and vision to life. How are you going to deliver your brand? How does your CX deliver on your brand? That's all strategy. Your culture is about the behaviors and how your employees bring that to life through their actions. And then your voice of the customer is about ongoing listening and insights to see whether you're delivering on your brand promise. And you're seeing whether you're evoking the emotions you want that your brand and CX go together. The way your employees show up deliver those emotions. The way your digital experiences deliver those emotions are key. And that what I like to do is drive an ongoing feedback loop where you drive behavior adoption of your employees and then are able to evolve your customer listening to see whether you're having the impact you want. And then you can run experiments in digital to see whether you're driving the impact and you get much more rapid feedback because your listening is more real time and it's not just surveys once a year. Well, it's been a lot of fun, Jenny. I know you've sparked a lot of great ideas for me, and I'm sure you have for the audience. If folks want to get in touch with you, is it best to go to Rock the Brands or LinkedIn, or what's the best way for people to follow up?
Yeah, you can get in touch with me at either rockthebrands.com or find me, Jennie Kaylie, on LinkedIn. Either way works for me. I will be around and I love having these types of conversations. So keep 'em coming.
Definitely feel free to reach out to us, and maybe we'll see you at the karaoke bar.
Sounds good. Bye. Take care.